and even verbally reprimanded me once for typing too loud on the keyboard.
It's so depressing when the upper echelon, the powers that be, aren't in touch with their people. Hey y'all, thanks for joining us for another episode of 911 Delta Tethered for Life. This podcast may not be suitable to all listeners due to language and subject matters. Please listen with care.
Hey y'all, welcome. Thanks for joining us for another episode of 911 Delta Tethered for Life podcast. We're your hosts, Casey and Anna. Tonight's episode, we're going to be talking about hostile work environment, bullying, and them snitch bitches. You're not going to want to miss this one, so grab those headsets, let's talk.
Snitch bitches was probably one of my favorite terms that we saw on social media, and also dispatch Hunger Games. So that's how we got into this topic this week, plus our wonderful listener who wrote into us. Last week, we delved into the world of social media and picked out some questions and some topics that we saw. But let's get this week's party started. All right, Casey, how was your week?
My week was actually pretty good, very productive, I would say. First time I can say that in a really long time. But then with the weekend, this past weekend, the time change, that totally fucked me up. Even though it's for the better, because we're losing an hour of work and shit, It still messed me up, and the rain. I'm just so over this rain.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
other than that, it was really good.
yeah, congrats to everybody who worked Saturday night because got a free hour.
Yeah.
The kids had a short week at school and they managed to get through it. And then we
A
went
short
down
week
to
without being sick.
right. We went down to Williamsburg for the weekend. So that was nice, even though it rained. And
Had a little retail therapy.
yeah, we bought a few little thingies for the kids, but that was it. My
That's nice.
sisters-in-law are big shoppers, so
Oh, yeah, not me.
me either. So,
Nope. Well, that's nice. Good
yeah.
getaway. Never hurt.
Tonight, let's see, we're talking about hostile work environments and bullying in the workplace.
It's going to be a good one.
Tonight, we have my friend Alicia joining us to talk about hostile work environments and bullying in the workplace. Alicia's currently a law enforcement officer, but she worked in dispatch before becoming a sworn Leo, or as we affectionately like to call them on this podcast, the dum-dums on the street. But in all seriousness, we do love our Leos anyway, and even when they have deserted dispatch. So, Alicia, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, having been in both worlds, I definitely don't miss having to not watch my facial expressions on calls. That was something to get used to really quick. Like, oh, people can see my face now.
Yeah, that would not be good for me at all. No.
No, it was definitely a learning curve. I pissed a couple people off before learning to kind of rein it in. But I'm a lifelong weird horse girl. I actually met Anna before ever even considering joining public safety. And while I love horses and competing as a rider, having grown up in an abusive environment, I always felt like my purpose was to help people. So I started dispatching in 2019 at a smaller county agency here in Virginia, and I spent just under 2 years there before I ultimately moved to a smaller agency outside of Charlottesville. I spent about 6 months there and then put in for a patrol opening when one opened up, and I went to the dark side. My ultimate goal is to work a canine someday. I've got my own personal dog at home that I've trained up. I'm blessed to be able to help other agencies with their canine training and their programs. Dispatch absolutely taught me some vital skills I needed for the road, and I think having worked there first set me up for more success and gave me a perspective that not every patrol officer has in regards to dispatch. So I've been on patrol for about a year and a half, and I live on a farm here in Virginia with my longtime boyfriend, our 2 horses and 2 dogs.
I think it is so cool how you got your dream and you're pursuing it and accomplishing it. I guess you're not totally there yet since you're not doing canine work yet. From when I met you, you have like, you're there, girl, or at least almost. And I think
Yeah,
that's so cool
it just feels
because
like forever ago that we met exercising horses together.
I know, and it wasn't that long. And then you were just like, well, I think our mutual friend was like, hey, Alicia's interested in like dispatching or becoming a deputy or something. And I'm like, okay. And then next thing I knew, you were doing it. I'm like, all right. And I know that you have definitely had some bumps along the way, but you've worked through them. So can you tell us a little bit about those bumps and how you've worked through them?
Absolutely. In these past 5 years, especially my first agency, I encountered some pretty massive bumps in the road. Some being so bad that I questioned if I really even wanted to keep pursuing that dream. Coming from the horse world, I know mean girls, but the behavior that I encountered at this first agency made those horse show bullies seem like angels, honestly. I was
Which
forced to
that's
deal with,
that's pretty crazy. Like from somebody who
oh
grew up in
yeah,
that world. Yeah.
yep, like you learn to just grin and bear it, but this was a whole different level. Um, I was forced to deal with horrific bullying and hostile behavior from a supervisor for over a year. Despite documentation, every request to move shifts was denied. This supervisor was pretty universally hated by every other dispatcher at that center, but the director loved her. And so she not only stayed, but she was continually promoted and praised. And there was a point under her where I was even experiencing suicidal ideation over the behavior and treatment that I was getting from her at work. I had a so-called friend that I considered a mentor on patrol turn on me and make up a lie simply to create drama, and that nearly cost me my job. My director there never asked me what had happened in that scenario, never asked me for my side of things, and simply believed what that now former deputy had claimed. So I was almost kind of getting it from 2 sides. I began getting written warnings seemingly every shift from my supervisor, and these warnings were explained as not being write-ups, but they required my signature and would be placed in my file regardless. I would get yelled at and mocked for asking for help on the floor, for struggling with paperwork. I'm sure both of you ladies know the headache that comes with protective orders and warrants getting put into VSIN.
Girl, you don't want me on visa.
That's the paperwork world of hell right there.
Right?
Oh, yeah. This supervisor would reprimand me for not talking to the rest of my shift enough, openly stated that I had been there longer than a newer dispatcher, but that he was doing a better job than me. Social plans were openly made with the rest of the shift and some of patrol that did not include me, even though I'm right there in the room while these plans are being made. This supervisor would make comments about my weight, saying that I wouldn't be so skinny when I was her age. Comments about my face because I'm deeply religious, and even verbally reprimanded me once for typing too loud on the keyboard.
Oh my God. Can you imagine? Like,
oh, I know. Like, she had been QAing calls, and she called me across the hall, and she said you could hear me typing over the phone, and what would that caller think? Well, the caller, I'm sure, would be thankful they could hear that I was sending help to them.
right.
I was in a very toxic relationship at the time, too, with a now former coworker, and that was only adding to the stress and the depression that was quickly taking over. And I stopped recognizing myself, and I just tried to focus solely on training my dog and helping the people that were calling for help. 8 months after getting assigned to the supervisor, I was pulled off the floor for yet another write-up. And she told me in front of the director that verbatim, I had demonstrated multiple times that I couldn't do the job. And that was the first write-up that I refused to sign. I was actually pretty livid that instant. Because every other person I had worked with disagreed with that. They thought I did the job great. I outlined everything in that I disagreed with, made corrections to that piece of paper, and that was the first write-up that I refused to sign. And from there was when I finally decided to make a hostile workplace complaint with that county. I took notes I had been keeping, which included all of my write-ups, 9 front and back pages of notes I'd taken about things that had occurred with dates and times. And the county ultimately determined that this supervisor had done nothing wrong. The case was dismissed, and I was still made to remain on that shift. It was definitely kind of an eye-opener.
Hold on, before you go on with that, because I know I'm getting more aggravated as I listen. I know this particular supervisor because the county where you worked, I have worked for them twice. When that particular person was first hired as a supervisor, she came in to the manager at the time, who was not the same one as when you were there, but came in absolutely in tears because she could not deal with a frequent caller, was one of the mentally challenged, emotionally disturbed people that we deal with on a daily basis. She came in so upset that she could not handle this. We were in the middle of a meeting. She had to interrupt the meeting to tell us this, broke down crying, was upset because the deputies or the patrol officers were getting upset with her. And she was in no position to handle what was happening. And it was really something very minor. So to hear that she then treated you this way, that just blows my mind. Like, because I saw her not be able to handle a very simple situation that we deal with every single day. And then for her to treat another employee that way. And then on top of that, for the county to not at least get you off of her shift after you've made this complaint and documented everything that's happening. So that's crazy to me. And it sounds like your story is very similar to our listener that wrote in. And so I'm really grateful that you came on. But I just want to say all that.
I mean, reading over the script, I was seeing so many parallels, and I was like, are we working in the same office?
You finally got out and went to another agency. Good for you. And I think you're going to tell us this later. She is no longer in the field, or at least not in that agency as a communication supervisor.
She is more in a supportive capacity. But yeah, like you said, I did finally get out. There were some circumstances surrounding my departure that were not the greatest, but when I did go to my now second agency, my current agency, I was asked within 2 weeks of finishing training on their CAD system if I wanted to be a training officer. So that was kind of an eye-opener for me that, hey, maybe I didn't suck as much as I was being constantly told that I did. I mean, to be a training officer, it's not always a great bump in pay, but you want good people training new dispatchers. You want people that are competent and know the job. And I don't think they would have asked me 3 weeks into this job if I wanted to be a training officer if I didn't know how to do the job. I definitely kind of had like some petty thoughts about that. I was like, well, I guess you didn't know all after all. But from there, I spent about 6 months there doing dispatch, and they had a patrol opening, and I put in for it. And they were gracious enough to take a chance on me and swore me in, sent me to academy. And now I'm on the dark side, have a fast car with blue lights. But that supervisor, like you said earlier, Anna, was let go from that agency about a year ago, the former agency. And from what I heard from friends still there, People were relieved and overjoyed from dispatch to patrol that she was gone.
Yeah.
And that's never a reaction that anybody should have when a supervisor leaves.
Well,
or when
no.
anybody leaves. That is never the reaction that you want.
The other thing that gets me about that, and I think the same thing happened with our listener, is that how is whatever you want to call them, the powers that be, the management, I mean, a lot of it depends on how your center is structured. I mean, sort of in our region in Virginia, we tend to be non-sworn personnel with a manager and then maybe some secondary sort of assistant supervisory people underneath that, maybe depending on the size of the agency, and then like some shift supervisors. In that particular agency, it is the manager and then the shift supervisors. And how is that one person so detached from the supervisors and the people working the floor that you are not the only person that has the problem, right? Because it's one thing if it's just you, they can kind of be like, oh, well, it's, just her, she's crazy or whatever, But
Right.
if it's everybody else is like, oh my God, this chick is killing us, and even people on the road, like, I just don't understand how a system, and I shouldn't say I don't understand it because I do totally understand it. I guess I don't understand it. I see it a lot. Like I see, I've worked in those situations and it just is so depressing when the upper echelon, the powers that be, aren't in touch with their people enough to realize what's happening on the floor.
Absolutely. I completely agree. When people like this supervisor that share those behavioral traits and those personality traits, they ultimately end up, not to sound crass, but brown nosing the
Right.
upper management enough that they get away with whatever they want. And the manager either likes them or they turn a blind eye or they aren't held to the same standard. Like I said before, I'm very religious. I struggled with feelings of happiness over the fact that she was no longer there. I was like, oh, karma got you. But really, at the end of the day, I wish her the best. I hold no bad feelings towards her anymore. And while I will never forget how a woman 17 years my senior behaved like a high school mean girl, put in actual effort to treat me bad, I take comfort in knowing that she didn't succeed in making me quit on my goals. I achieved my dream despite her actions and other obstacles that occurred along the way, such as my so-called mentor choosing drama over being a friend, and even things outside of work. And I think it made me not only a better dispatcher, but it made me a better deputy as well.
Definitely a better person than me. You put up with that way too long. Oh my God. I would have been like, bitch, let's go outside.
The thought crossed my mind a couple times, but I was just like, nope, you just got to grin and bear it.
Yep. Yeah, because it's going to hurt them more in the long run. You actually succeeding and not, failing like they want. It's going to hurt them more. And now look, you're ahead and she's whatever.
Yeah, and if you have those feelings of, a little bit of happiness, that's okay, because we decided many years ago that Casey is actually driving the bus straight to hell.
Oh yeah.
So it's fine. It's fine. Yep. We're all going to be on it together. It's cool.
We'll always have an extra seat.
Right. The bus gets bigger every year.
Yep. Well, we thank you, Alicia, for coming on and helping us out with this topic. We've been getting some feedback from our listeners about hostile work environments and bullying. Folks think that because we're in the comm center or, we're out on the streets fighting crime, that we don't endure any of that stuff. Like there can't be any drama in the workplace for us. We're trying to make everything better. Well, yeah, that's not how it works. Like we've said before, we're all still human and it's just the way it goes. So.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen several posts recently about the same topic in the dispatcher groups on social media. And I can tell you from my husband being in fire service for so long and being a volunteer fire chief and now career deputy fire chief. There is so much drama. I mean, and it's not just dispatch, right? Like firemen, I mean, I realize it's men and women now, but it's still a heavy on the male side field. I'm going to tell you, sometimes that drama is worse than dispatch drama. And I'm like, really? You are grown men. But anyway,
Right.
I just don't get
And I've
why.
seen that on patrol as well,
Yeah,
which
exactly,
again is
right?
still heavily male dominated, and you're like, you're adults, come on.
Right. And I don't get why this is such a problem in our field. I mean, especially seeing as how we should all be working as a team. Not only should we
Correct.
be mature adults, but we should be working as a team. How do we fix
Sure.
it?
Yeah, I don't think it'll ever be really fixed, but we so that will bring us into, we had one listener reach out to us about sharing her story of one agency that she worked for. I'm calling her Sheila. She was hired on with two other folks. One of those folks ended up on the same shift as Sheila, and the shift had talked about how they were big on doing shift outings outside of work. The shift openly invited the other newbie in front of Sheila, and then Sheila was like, "Hey," basically said, "Hey, I can be free," and they straight up told her, "No, you can't come."
Yeah, and that is never okay. But at the same, I mean, I think when you stick mostly or all women in a small room together for 12 hours, good things rarely come out of it.
Yeah.
A couple of those things sound very similar to things that I went through in my situation. I was that first agency fully staffed, counting a supervisor, was 4 people to a shift. And I was never once invited to join the rest of my shift when they went to dinner and camping trips and 4-wheeling events. And it definitely kind of made me feel like I didn't belong. There definitely needs to be a balance. And I'm not faulting my former shift partners for not speaking up. They had their own positions to worry about. And I'm
Right.
very close friends with one of them to this day.
We used to, Casey, back in the day, when we all worked together, we did quite a few shift outings. And I know, and we would do them with patrol, and that was a lot more people. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
at least probably 15 if everybody, and then plus spouses or whatever came, because it was always an open invite. Yeah, it's not like we liked everybody, every deputy or law enforcement officer, or we were besties with all the dispatchers. Everybody still got invited.
I mean, hell, even I got invited, and they knew damn well my ass wasn't coming because I live under a rock.
I think you did come one time. I just don't understand that level of immaturity. And I feel like in Sheila's agency, and I know in the agency that Alicia came from, like that immaturity was a problem. I mean, even in people that were mature. And I laugh because thinking back on it one time, and I was a pretty new dispatcher, I actually got written up or at least reprimanded, verbally reprimanded for being immature because a volunteer fireman who was also a dispatcher, we got a house fire. And at the time, it was only 2 dispatchers working. And so our phones are blowing up. There's a lot of radio traffic. And he's a volunteer. He calls in on the phone to ask us the details on this fire. And I was like,
Oh, gosh.
you know better, and hung up the phone on him. And I can't remember whether it was a write-up or it was a verbal reprimand, but either way, for being immature because I didn't treat him as like a regular citizen or what. What? He was immature for calling in because also when he called in, his tone was very, jovial and, hey man, where am I going for this fire? Like that kind of thing. And I'm like, uh-uh, I don't have time for you. Click.
Right.
Yeah. So I get it. But I think for whatever reason, that has been like a culture that's been bred in that agency. And I think also in the agency that Sheila comes from or came from, her first agency too. Like that's what it sounds like. It was just like there's this culture of immaturity that's bred and
For sure.
fostered, and nobody puts a kibosh on it.
Right.
That's a good way to put that. I had not thought of it like that before, but that's a really good kind of way to break that down.
Yeah, I mean, just thinking back. And like Sheila said, I mean, and the group would also discuss inappropriate sexual type things. At some point she had gone to her management to voice the concerns. And from that point on, if the shift started up a conversation, they would ask her if she was going to go snitch about what they were talking about. Like, even if she makes a complaint, like somebody shouldn't say, "Oh, hey, Sheila says you guys are talking about." And look, I have worked with all women. I have worked with a mix of men and women. I have worked with just a man or two on night shift. And we have discussed some inappropriate things, let me tell you. But
Oh, yeah.
that
I mean,
being
that happens on every shift.
right, but
Yes.
that being said, we
Whether
were
it's a call or
all
dispatch or whatever.
right. We were all comfortable with it. It wasn't like if somebody was like, "Hey, I'm not really comfortable having this conversation with you," you didn't get bullied into having the conversation. We would just move on.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But like,
But most times that was not the case at all.
apparently not for Sheila and this
Well, not for Sheila, for sure.
agency, but my gosh. And then to have like them ask you, "Oh, are you going to go snitch?" And we used to joke. I know we did this, Casey. When we all worked on shift together, we would, because we'd have conversation and be like, "Oh, we're gonna be having to go to
Fred Pryor, Human Resources.
right next week. We're gonna be getting a notice that we're all gonna have to do some HR training, sexual harassment in the workplace, or
well, I mean, I work with on my shift on patrol now. I work with 2 men and a woman, and it's a running joke between all 4 of us that they keep like a running tally of, oh, I guess we're up to 32 HR complaints now. And that's just kind of how it is. But everybody recognizes that we're joking. We're joking, and there's a line that does not get crossed.
and I think that again goes to maturity, right? Like just knowing, oh, if somebody's not comfortable, let me keep my mouth shut, or
Yeah.
and not just going above and beyond to make somebody uncomfortable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, having grown up in the environment that I did, I've done a lot of research and reading about immature adults and narcissistic people. Narcissism is a term that gets, and I'm sure you both have heard it, it gets thrown around way too much these days. Because narcissism is actually, I think what a lot of people don't realize is it's a diagnosable psychological personality disorder. But there certainly seem to be a lot of people out there, especially in public safety, with these tendencies, even if not the full-blown disorder. And unfortunately, when you work in shift work, like the types of shifts we work, you really end up spending more time with coworkers than your own family. And I've noticed that in this type dynamic, people start often feeling like they're entitled to your personal life when they're not, and they'll get butthurt, for lack of a better term, when you tell them, like, hey, no, it's not your business. But on the flip side, there's a massive difference between being friendly with your shift and openly bullying and ostracizing 1 or 2 coworkers, or purposely having discussions that they're uncomfortable with. There's no excuse for it. And the petty high school behavior, honestly, it needs to be left in high school. But at the same time, to touch on that last part of what you said, where Sheila went to management and it got back to her shift that she had gone and made a report, you got to be careful who you open up to and vent to, because some people, they want to listen not to help you, but they want to get in on some tea. which is
All
what it
right.
sounds like happened in Sheila's situation. When you do decide to report behavior, you need to document name and position of the person it was reported to.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think those folks sound like they just like to add that sugar and half to that tea or
Mm-hmm.
honey or whatever.
And then sit back and watch.
Yep, that's it. So they also were showing even more immaturity. This group would even make fun of the meals that she would bring and saying that, I can't believe you're eating that. God, that smells awful. And also started giving her a hard time about taking too long in the bathroom. And I can tell you one goddamn thing. If I got to go to the bathroom, I'm 40 some years old. I'm going to the fucking bathroom. And I don't care if it takes me 5 minutes or if it's going to take me 20 minutes to do my business.
And
No,
in your defense, Casey, and pretty much anybody, I think, on our shift when we work nights, especially because, sometimes there's less people on the floor, right? If you were going to be in there for a little bit, you would say, hey, I'm going to be in there for a little bit.
Yep.
Like,
Right.
and even if it did, I mean, sometimes we might give you a little bit of hard time if it took you a long time. But
Yeah.
again, it was all in good fun, and we made sure that we knew you weren't upset about it. Like it was something that you would have said to us.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no,
You
I
know.
never. I mean, it's like no different than somebody going out smoking for damn 20, 30 minutes. Like,
Right.
so why can't I take a shit for 30 minutes or 20 minutes? I mean, come on. I mean,
Right.
but anyways.
Yep.
And, I think a big factor in all of this is these type A narcissistic personalities, they're not only attracted to positions of authority, such as first responder roles, but they're often either rewarded by their superiors or their superiors can consciously turn a blind eye to this behavior. Not to delve too deep into it, but into like the psychoanalyzing, but a lot of these people either grew up in unhealthy environments or for whatever reason maintained that juvenile mean girl attitude that got them surface level acceptance growing up. I know when I was dealing with my bully, I would spend longer in the bathroom just trying to get a break from that person. I mean, Anna, you know the layout of the floor at the center I started out at. It was a very small room.
Yes.
And I would go in the bathroom just because I don't smoke. I still don't smoke. And so I couldn't justify going outside. So I would go hide in the bathroom.
Right. Oh, yeah. And, that room, you were definitely elbow to elbow. That personality type you can find it anywhere, but a lot of people that, sometimes they think they get power and privilege with the public safety role, which is never a good thing, but those people sometimes do make it. A lot of times they do get weeded out eventually. Also, people who have come from backgrounds like yourself, like you want to help people, right? Well, sometimes that doesn't mean you worked through all your bullshit before you got the job, you know? And so some of these people, yeah, they came from a place that wasn't very mature. And so they never learned how to really interact with other people. And then I think some people are just, their boundaries are a little mushier. And for those people, especially being around a narcissistic type person, whether that's really their personality disorder or if it's just a tendency they have, right? That's tricky because they're not setting those clear boundaries.
And people that tend to have these tendencies, even if it's not like the full blown out disorder, if you give them an inch, they will take a mile every single time. It doesn't matter what career field you're in what capacity you know this person, but if you give them any inkling of an inch, they will take it and they will run with it. And they will blow through every boundary you try to set until you finally have to scream in their face, no, that's enough. And then all of a sudden they're the victim. And I mean, people can get these, can develop these tendencies either growing up in an unhealthy environment or just never having boundaries growing up, never being told no, being spoiled. So sometimes it's almost a lose-lose situation. But like in my situation, having to run to the bathroom to get a break from this person felt so demeaning a lot, because while the others on the shift were allowed to take breaks and go get food, and I'm sure you remember, we were allowed to leave the center to go to get fast food or something. I was often refused and told I needed to hurry up and get back on the floor. And I was even reprimanded more than once for almost being late, because where my shift mates would arrive 30 minutes prior to shift start, I was freaking miserable. And so I would show up less than 10 minutes prior.
When you still have to run to the bathroom, I'm like, man, that's what you do when you have 2 toddlers at home. You lock yourself in the bathroom. You're like, I gotta get a break from these little fools. So you mentioned this earlier, and Sheila had the same thing happen to her, that someone even called her outright incompetent in front of everyone else on the floor. And they treated a newer dispatcher as someone who was either more experienced or they were just cute and learning when that dispatcher made mistakes, whereas she would get yelled at and, called incompetent.
Yeah.
That's not acceptable behavior. Like, definitely. I don't even think they let my kindergartner do that. So I'm really confused as to where that is okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wonder if me and Sheila work at the same place. There's so many.
Well,
and maybe we did. I don't know who Sheila's real name is. So Sheila, if you're out there and I'm familiar to you, what's up?
You know this voice.
Right. I have a pretty uncommon name. So in all seriousness, it's so upsetting to know that these types of issues are so widespread and rewarded in our professions as, oh, they're such a strong person, or, oh, they really know how to get things done, when they're just steamrolling people. It's one thing to not like somebody, just like you guys were talking about with your shift outing. Everywhere we go in life, there's going to be people that we don't like or get along with. But the issue arises, I think, when you let your personal opinion of somebody dictate and cloud your observation of their job performance. There's plenty of people out there that I don't like, but I still recognize when they're legitimately good or at least competent at their job. You're not going to be friends with everybody you work with, but you always need to stay professional and not use your position or your rank to take advantage of somebody. I mean, nobody's perfect, and nobody's going to do the job exactly the same way you might, but that's the beauty of public safety. Mm-hmm. I was told recently by a supervisor something that stuck with me, actually, and I don't think they even intended it that way, or for it to stick with me, but they said, as long as you're not violating policy, breaking the law, or acting immoral, handle the call how you feel it's handled.
Good advice, yeah.
That's totally good advice.
And how I think a lot of supervisors should look at it. I mean, yeah, I know we all have policies and procedures, but again, if you're not violating those and you're helping or, you're assisting in the best way you can,
mm-hmm.
then, sometimes different personalities handle things differently, and sometimes different personalities do better. We've all either been on the phone with that
complete batshit crazy
emotional person and somebody else can talk to them, or, as a law enforcement officer, you show up on the scene and you're like, oh, I can't deal with this one.
We all see the memes of cops when they're the memes and the jokes of, oh, when your partner shows up, that's going to inflame the situation every time.
Right.
There's
There's
a
always
fight
that
when
one
this
guy.
person shows up on scene, and you're like, oh Lord, not them. Please leave.
Yep.
Thankfully, I haven't had that yet, but I'm still only a year and a half in, so you never know.
I'm so amazed at like all this stuff, and we're still not even done with some of the crap that she's had to go through. So then she also had a supervisor mock her and make fun of a sensitive personal hygiene issue. Um, Sheila also witnessed units on the street purposely doing more traffic stops when another dispatcher they didn't like was on the radio. I think it's at this point when she decided that switching to another locality might be a good idea, which I think was Sheila's ultimate best decision. It sounds. She said that she knows the importance and the stress of the job. Personnel and citizen safety, is her priority. And she wants to know, how can one get past this type of behavior when you have no real support from your superiors? That's almost caused her to quit doing what she truly enjoys. So it's really sad.
It is sad. And, I think there's definitely a few things we all have to say about this situation. Like I said, it does seem like an immature work environment. Unfortunately, when you're in one of those, it's hard to just rise above that.
It is.
Because if the superiors, my dad used to always say shit rolls downhill, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if it's coming from the top and it's not being handled, then it's gonna continue. And we all know that dispatchers can be the worst about being judgy and unaccepting of new people. But generally we're quiet about it,
Yeah.
Right.
right? It's like
Generally, it's not just out in the open, no secret that this person doesn't like that person.
right.
Right.
I mean, keep your dumbass opinions to yourself or, in your really close friend group that right? Outside of
Yeah.
work. Because you know too that this job, whether it's dispatching or law enforcement, is takes a special kind of person and there's a lot of turnover. So not everybody's going to make it. And I think that does make us naturally defensive when newbies come in and, especially if they don't have any experience, right? It's like, oh boy, and they're
Yeah.
19 or, whatever. And it's like, but that's our own bullshit. And we're just projecting it onto others. And I
Right.
think that's the biggest takeaway for me for all of this is like, if you're in this situation, remember that this is somebody else's bullshit that they're projecting onto you.
Well, I mean, I can honestly say, I'd be lying if I'd sit here and act like I'm just like, freaking angel, because that's not the case. Have I been in that, little clique group at one point or talk shit about somebody? Yes, I have. I've been there, done that, but never, ever would I treat somebody like Alicia was treated, like Sheila's been treated. I just tell everybody off.
If you're in this situation, you definitely want to document everything and then know your organization's and your state's policies on everything. Hostile work environments, supervisors, like just do your research. If you need to go talk to a human resources person, depending on the size of your agency, like that may not be somebody who's detached from your department, but the other thing you could do is talk to an attorney who specializes in that. A lot of times, you could get a free consult,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just important when it comes down to things like that that you document and that your department, agency, jurisdiction, whatever it is you work for, that what their policies and procedures are so that you can stay on the up and up of it and not get yourself in
Right.
trouble by doing something that's not appropriate. Because if you're already in a situation where you're being bullied or things always seem to be coming down to you, don't expect it to get better when you start complaining. And I know that
Yeah.
sounds terrible, but unfortunately, that's the way it is. And so at that point, you need to be just saving your own ass,
Yeah, I mean, at that point, they've already got
Absolutely.
it in for you, so definitely
right?
it's not going to get better.
I think you ladies have really touched on it. I can absolutely attest to Casey's point or Anna's point about documenting. Something that my first dispatch trainer that still works with this first agency that I'm still very close friends with, she taught it to me on day 2 of my first dispatching job, was that if it's not documented, then it did not happen, period. No ifs, ands, or buts. It's so, so important and crucial in situations like this. My first agency had a surveillance camera on the floor, and I made sure to write down dates and times of every single incident that occurred on that floor. And even 4 years later, I still have all of those notes and every write-up and the ultimate letter that I received from HR with their determinations. And I just keep them in a file. And the policy thing is, just like you said, it's so important because it's the parameters within which we operate. And they're not only there for your agency, but for you as well. I mean, I'm still close friends with, like I said, my first CTO and another girl from that agency. And I know that even after I left, that supervisor alone was responsible for the extreme turnover that that agency experienced. 3 years after I have left, my former CTO is the only person that's still there who was there before me. And that center, fully staffed, is less than 20 people. That's a huge amount of turnover. I just thought of this little bit was, don't ever get so attached to an agency that you feel like you can't leave. God works in mysterious ways, and we only grow through discomfort. You should never, ever tolerate being miserable and afraid for a job. I know they all say that in this world of public safety that, oh, we're family here. No, it's a job. At the end of the day, it is nothing but a job.
Right. And when you leave, they are going to fill your spot. They don't care.
Yep.
Exactly. I never would have achieved my goals if I had stayed there. And I never would have begun dating my current partner, who has taught me what a healthy love looks like, that I'm building a wonderful life with. I know that I'm now doing what I was meant to do. And while I'm still new to the patrol side of things, I know that this chaotic career field and this bus to hell that Casey mentioned, it's where I'm supposed to be. And I guess my final piece of input is really that while this episode was about toxic workplaces and how common they are in public safety, this field is also full of some of the most caring, thoughtful, professional, and passionate people I have ever had the honor of knowing, who did join this field for the right reasons. And those are the people that you can count on. Those are the people who make it worth it and who give the best advice and who become the friends that span beyond the career. Those are your people, and if you can't find them at one agency, find them at another. I promise that they're out there.
Definitely they are. And I think that's so true, that there are the majority of the people that are in this field, in the public safety world, are in it for the right reasons and do amazing things every day to help people. There's only a few bad apples, but of course, they get the most press, right? Just like anything
Right.
else. So I do think the good people are out there. You just have to find your people, go forth and prosper, because those bad people will weed themselves out eventually.
Yep.
I have faith.
Absolutely. I completely agree.
When one door closes, what is that? When one door closes, another one opens.
Yep.
So,
Mm-hmm.
You want me to sing that for you? No, I'm just kidding.
are you gonna
You know.
sing Sheila too?
Oh, Sheila, let me love you till the morning comes. We got
Casey
love
and
for
our-
you, Sheila girl. We got love for you.
That's right. We're doing a new thing to end our episode, and so Alicia's our first victim.
Oh, no.
So we got some rapid fire questions. They're short and easy. Are you a fan of texting or talking?
I like talking better.
Early bird or night owl?
Definitely an early bird. I just switched to nights, and it's a horrific adjustment.
Ugh, both of you girls. Ugh.
Yeah, I'm
All
early
right.
bird too.
If you had a superpower, invisibility or super strength?
I have to go with invisibility because I am still female and I'm nosy and I like to know things. So
If you could just be a fly on the wall, I agree. That's a good one.
Yes, that's a good
absolutely.
one. And one thing you can't live without.
I got to go with my animals. They have kind of been that island in the middle of a pond on so many occasions for me.
I like that. Yeah. All right. This one's a little harder. One book or piece of literature that you think everyone should read or listen to, since we're all in the Audible world now. Doesn't have to be public safety related.
I got to be honest, I am a huge Game of Thrones nerd. I always have been. So I'm always going to recommend that series to everybody. The books are better than the series or the TV show.
Interesting. I've not read or seen it, so
Me
maybe
neither.
I'll add it to my list.
All right, and last one. What is the message you want to spread to the world?
The biggest message there is that I would want to share is don't ever give if God has put something in your heart, don't ever give up on it. I would have been safe if I'd given up and just, oh, I'm done with public safety. But God just kept telling me, He kept putting it on my heart to just keep trying one more time, just keep going. And I've made it. And I know that I'm in a position I can make a difference. So I think it's just that stereotypical just don't give up, just keep going. Even when you can't see a way out.
And even if
Awesome.
you are a driver of the bus to hell like I am, just toot that horn, bitch. Just toot it.
Keep tooting your horn. That's right. All right. And
Yes.
I do have one more question for you tonight because we're going to have Dr. Meredith back on. I don't know if you listened to her episode, but if there was one question you could ask the psychologist, what would it be?
I think that a good question would be, what are some ways to combat that burnout when you just feel like you're off work and you just can't get up off the couch, or you can't even stand the thought of going into work, even when it's something that you know you love that career.
That's
Very
a good one.
That is
It's
a good one.
actually on our list for our next episode with her, burnout and compassion fatigue. So
Yep, so that's perfect.
we're going to put that question in there for her.
Indeed.
Mhm. Well, thank you, Alicia, for being here. Thank you for sharing your time with us.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, guys.
Thank you for our listeners for the great feedback. And remember, we do have Dr. Meredith coming back on to discuss burnout and compassion fatigue. So we've received a couple questions so far. Add Alicia's to the list, but don't hesitate to get yours in, email us, DM us on the social media. You can leave a voice message on Spotify. And if there's another mental health topic you want to discuss, let us know that too.
And again, guys, all these questions are copay free.
This week, we want to give a big shout out to the listener who wrote into us and got us talking about this topic. We are wishing you very well and much success in your new center. And we're also giving a big shout out to firefighter Brian Diamond of Sterling Volunteer Fire Department. He's still fighting in the burn unit from injuries sustained in an explosion last month. We are sending healing vibes your way, Brian, and keeping your family in our thoughts. All right, guys, please keep listening, sharing. Remember to follow us on your podcast app and rate the show. 5 stars, obviously. If you can't review us on your podcast app, you can do it on our Facebook page. You can also send us a voice message through Spotify. It does help other people find us and keeps the show going. So please show us your love.
Till next time, y'all. Bye.
All right. Bye.
If you are a driver of the bus to hell like I am, just toot that horn, bitch. Just toot it. This is so fun.